A little bit about me. So I grew up on a family farm in Sevington, just outside of Ilminster. I always wanted to join the Navy up until I met my wife at a Young Farmers Do, and then decided that actually I didn't really want to be away from home 6 months at a trot, staring at grey. So coming from the family farm, unfortunately my granddad couldn't pay me enough beer tokens compared to a Saturday job at Branston Limited. So they are one of the biggest potato packers in the UK, and they do pack potatoes for the majority of the supermarkets. So I started there at the age of 16, mending wooden boxes at the weekends, and I stayed there for 15 years. I was always interested in farming, obviously, growing up on a farm, and I was offered a chance to join their agronomy team just over a few summers, and luckily they gave me the time to study and gain the experience before gaining a qualification. So I'll always thank them for that. In that business, I became the agronomy manager. So this was advising potato growers predominantly in the south of England, missing a fair chunk of Wales over into Pembrokeshire. Spend a lot of time in Jersey and parts of Europe and Israel, just trying to get the best quality, the best advice, yields, etc. Very impressed with the growing of potatoes in Israel. Very forward-thinking country. They won't be without their issues when it comes to groundwater in the future. So when I was last there, probably around about 7 years ago, they were introducing a reduction year on year because they had to like 50-hectare centre pivot irrigation field. So it would take 24 hours for the irrigation system to go around a circular field. So they realised very quickly that they are starting to lose a lot of the ground source water. So they are reducing year on year 10% that they allow the farmers to irrigate. So obviously it won't help fill those aquifers as quick, but they are taking a stand and learning how to manage their water consumption over in Israel. So at the age of around 35, I went down to Cornwall and managed a big farm down there. So we grew around about 1,500 acres of early Cornish potatoes and a similar area of daffodils. So we employed probably around about 30 people on the books all year round, and then it was casual labour, predominantly from Eastern Europe, which was probably around about 800 people at its peak at mid-picking season. And those flowers used to go to Marks and Spencer's and various other supermarkets. After around 20 years working with potatoes, I wanted to broaden my horizons, and so now I am a seed manager at Pierce Seeds just outside of Sherborne. So we pretty well do all agricultural seeds, so grass, all of the cereals, maize, and from my background, we are now selling seed potatoes. So that's encouraging. So that's a little bit of my history. So what is agronomy? So let me just move. Oh, how do we go back? How do we go back, peoples? Previous,
yeah.
There we go. So I'm just trying to minimize this. Right, so what is agronomy? So I went to various places. So the Oxford Dictionary say the science of soil management and crop production. Wikipedia, agronomy is the science and technology of producing and using plants in agriculture for food, fibre, fuel, recreation and land restoration. Agronomy has to encompass work in the areas of plant genetics, plant physiology, meteorology and soil science. And for me, I think it's quite clear that it's the best advice at the best time. That's putting it very, very short. So that's what is agronomy. What is an agronomist? So an agronomist are scientists who are all well trained in studying, caring for and researching crops. They critically examine crops to help fight disease or pest attacks. They're independent advisors to farmers to achieve the best yields available for their farm monitor and advise on the return on their investment. Through my experience, it becomes clear that you almost become a very trusted member of the farmer's extended family. And a bit of tongue-in-cheek here, usually they would be in a field wearing a check shirt, chinos and wellies. And if you've watched Clarkson's Farm, think of Cheerful Charlie. So let me just bring this up a little bit. So to become an agronomist, it's not easy. So there's a great deal of training before you can take your examinations. So usually you could do this at agricultural college. I didn't actually go to agricultural college, so it all had to be self-taught or get the experience on the job. So to start with, you go through and you do an IPM course, which is your integrated pest management. So as an example, this is where you would look at putting a beetle bank down through a center of a field. So this would attract pollinators, beetles, ladybirds. Now the importance of that is if you've got aphids attacking a crop, the ladybirds like to eat aphids. So it's a natural barrier, natural defense to hopefully encourage the beneficiaries to take on the pests that you might not want in the field. Now, this doesn't get away from the fact of farmers using chemicals, but it could help reduce chemical use, which is what it's all about. You know, no agronomist wants to go straight to a chemical store and advise on a can of chemicals. You know, we have to think of cultural control before chemical. So that's where you kind of learn a lot to do with the cultural control of pest diseases. You then sit down and you put down, this is sort of like a 2-year course, but it's not full-time, it's like 2 by 6 weeks. So BASIS stands for the British Agrochemical Standards Inspection Scheme. So no agronomist can advise on chemical use to a farmer without passing this exam. You could shadow somebody in it. And the reason why this is very important is because all chemicals will have a different rate, a different time of use, and what you don't want to do after all of the farmers paid for all of that investment is to ruin it by using the wrong pesticide at the wrong time. So that's all about training. And then you then take on FACS, which is a Fertilizer Advisors Certification and Training Scheme. So again, with the chemical side of thing, you have to sit down and pass on fertilizer advice. With all of these, you have to do practical exams, you have to do identifications, you have to do projects. So my project was the reduction of wireworm in potato crops using pheromone traps to assess how many beetles might create larvae in the soil to determine the risk of planting potatoes in the following year. So again, you look at all of the cultural controls. What can you do? Would you even plant potatoes in that field? If the risk is that high, don't do it. So you can use lots of trapping methods a year before to assess whether you plant a crop in that field. And then you have like a multiple choice, you have an essay, 3 essay answer questions, and then you have to sit in front of a panel of 2 to 3 people that basically interrogate you to make sure that they are happy with you and your advice on farm. So it's not the easiest exams to get through, but with a very understanding wife and good employers, they will give you the time to study and gain that knowledge. One that I really enjoyed doing it's quite going back probably around about 9 years ago that I took on BETA, which was the biodiversity and environmental training for advisors. And this is sort of looking out all for sort of your hares and doing animal counts and looking at bat species. And this was very interesting. And you could clearly see then that this is going to be the future. You don't actually have to have BETA as an agronomist. It's just a very nice addition. And I think that the way we're going in the world, that this is going to be quite an important tick in the box for agronomists to achieve. But again, it's not it's not legal, but I felt that it was a very worthwhile achievement to get. So through all of these, we've got the continuing professional development points where we have to, whether it's an online assessment, if you have internal presentations from companies, you will get some points to show that you've taken on board, you've learned something new, and you're always trying to develop your understanding in the agronomy world. So currently you have to collect 50 points each year to stay on the register. And it's been quite a challenge because obviously we haven't been able to have the external speakers, we haven't been able to go to conferences over the last 18 months. We've still had to gain these points, but the BASIS team have put classrooms online. So you would watch a 30-minute video and then you would have questions afterwards to make sure that you've understood what you've seen. And as well, you get letters after your name. So we all get MBPR, which is a member of the BASIS Professional Register. So if you need passport signatures, let me know if I've known you for the required years. So compliance. Now, this is a huge thing in farming because obviously you have to be compliant. If not, there's some very big fines, and ultimately you would be fined through not being compliant because you have endangered the environment. So obviously that's something that nobody wants to go down, and nobody wants to see a disaster happen. So I've got some, I didn't get it all on a slide because there's so many, but just for instance, just on the chemical side of things, you've got the Plant Protection Product Regulations 2011, the Sustainable Use Directive 2009, you've got the Statistics Regulation of 2009, Machinery Directive, you've got the maximum residue levels, and then you've got Acts of Parliament, which are the Poisons Act, the Health and Safety at Work Act, Food and Environmental Protection, the Environmental Protection Act, Food Safety Act, and the Water Industries Act. So there's lots and lots. So for each individual aspect of agronomy, I'm not saying I know word for word, but certainly you want to be looking at all of these and be aware of all of the issues for farming. But also you have NVZs, so they are nitrate vulnerable zones. So this is where obviously the soil, if it's sandy soil, sloped soil, could have more runoff from your soils into rivers. Looking at the map, I've got the stats here. It's 55% of the country which is actually in an NVZ. You've got to keep all of your paperwork for 5 years. You're only allowed a maximum limit of 250 kgs of total organic N per hectare in a 12-month period. And there is a 50-meter minimum distance that you can spread manure from a spring, well, or a borehole. So all of these things you have to be kind of aware if you're giving advice. So looking at the map before, when I was doing this, a lot of the Somerset levels are not in an NVZ, but in my practice, I used to like to think of an NVZ to start with, to limit the risk, unless a crop needed it. Sorry, is that some questions coming in? I just see it's come up with more too. I didn't know if that's questions.
The chat room is a good place to put questions, but perhaps we could address those when you finish your talk, Richard.
Yeah, it was just it just came up there, more, and then the number 2, so I didn't know if there was questions.
Yeah, that's the chat. There may well be, but thank you for raising that, because if people do have questions, you could bung them into the chat. Richard could keep an eye on them and answer them as we go along if you want.
I honestly couldn't see them. It just came up as a subheading. I don't know.
Sorry, I just put something on there. Sorry, as I was going to leave it to the end, but as it's come up, I just noticed on your list you haven't got the Environment Agency's farming rules for farming with water rules. So I just put that as a link, as another thing about compliance.
I've got the Water Framework Directive. Is that?
It's slightly different.
Okay, yeah.
It came out in 2018. They're relatively new, but we can.
Yeah, because I just noticed the Water Framework Directive. There's a brand new one this year as well, for 2021. So that there's many compliance issues out there which we need to know about. So it's the closed periods for spreading slurry and manure. You've got nutrient management plans where you have to show that you've actually thought on what's in it, whether it's organic matter or nitrogen from a bag, fertilizer from the bag, that you know what the previous crop has taken away to know what to replace for the following crop. Obviously, I've had some involvement with catchment sensitive farming for the River Parrett, because back around the pack house, the top end of Shepton Beecham, that was in an NVZ. So we did all we could to stay part of that. And because now I'm working for a company just in the Dorset border, a lot of our agronomists are having to be aware of the Poole Harbour catchment sensitive farming. And then obviously one of the main ones is for everyone to follow the good agricultural and environmental conditions, which are set out, that are a minimum standard for all to follow. So just looking at farming in general, yes, there has been a huge loss of farmers even in the last, these dates 2008 to 2018. So there has been an absolute huge loss of, when you look at small farmers under 5 hectares, of 8,000 farmers in a 10-year period. And obviously all of the figures are there, there's lots to talk about, but we are seeing that the smaller farmers are leaving the industry, and obviously the bigger farms are becoming bigger, or less of them, but a bigger area. But obviously if you want to highlight anything in there, it's all subheading for dairy or horticulture, cereals, but sometimes that might be a rotational thing, or it might be a weather event, because back in 2019 nobody could get their winter wheat into the soil, so it had to wait until the following spring of 20. So that there could be some area differences because of issues like that over a calendar year. This is obviously, I think it's going in the right direction. When you look at all of the active ingredients that were new in a decade, as you can see in the 2010s, there was only 40 new active ingredients. When you look at the 1990s with 120, that is because to get a new active ingredient to market, and this could be an organic product as well, it takes so much money and so many trials to prove that it doesn't have an effect on the environment, or it helps improve yields, that actually a lot of companies are saying the investment, why worry about it? So that's interesting itself, that because it costs so much money, people are not bringing new active ingredients because they've got so many environmental restrictions, and, well, say restrictions, but they have to prove that it's not damaging the environment. So looking at this figure, this is also very, very good news, that if you look back to the 1950s and 60s, this is how many grams per hectare of active ingredient were being applied to crops. So herbicides, over 2000 1950s, over 2050, but now you look at, you're probably around if you call it 200, that is a massive decline in active ingredient that is going onto the soil. So again, it's definitely going in the right direction for all of these, because it's all found in watercourses, they get banned quite rightly. So I think that this trend is a good thing for the environment. And again, I think this graph is very encouraging as well. So obviously you look at the orange line is the conventional crop protections, which is tailing off, but also very encouraging as well that the biological natural products are coming up through ranks. It's great news. I'll talk about this in a slide or two's time, but oilseed rape and neonicotinoids, quite rightly was banned from the European Union in 2018, with the exception of Poland, because they had a derogation. So we are not allowed to treat any seed with neonicotinoids. So through science, we have a product called Silas, which is a biostimulant, which, sorry, there is a question, sorry, I can't see it.
A significant issue here is that smaller family farms have increasingly little influence over what happens on their land because they let to agribusiness.
Yes, potentially, yeah. Yeah.
That's perhaps something to discuss after your presentation.
But again, I think that this is an encouraging slide for the environment, because obviously it's natural. My time in potatoes, we were working alongside a company that actually introduced what we called a Nema Slug. So it was a nematode naturally found in soil to control slugs. So it had to go on in wet conditions to penetrate the soil. You could put it on irrigation through the boom onto the soil. This was a naturally found nematode in British soil, so it was native. But what you could do is you could put it on in number to actually control slugs, to save use of the normal slug pellets. And again, you could see to a line in the following wheat crop that there was no slug damage on the side of the field that had that Nema Slug technology. Now, eventually it will run out, because if there's no food, the nematodes have no feeding source, and obviously lose numbers over a course of time. Now, what that time is hard to say. But again, you know, this technology I find fascinating. I think it's great for the environment, just to remove pesticides if you don't need them. But obviously that technology is expensive, was very expensive, but as technology gets better, prices will come down. Now, on some crops where you have high value, that could make sense. On a lower value crop, obviously would you get a return on that investment? So I wouldn't say it's widespread yet, but watch this space. So again, I've got a few slides here on public perception of farming. Please take this with tongue in cheek if you are members of any of these groups. I don't mean to offend, but obviously I will always try and back British farming when I can. But this is what some of the public are thinking of farming. So I'll go through them. So you've got the Extinction Rebellion there, symbol. I've got no problem with them at all. I think they've got a just cause. Again, you know, let's try and work with anyone in these groups and try and understand how to work in farming with everyone. Greta, bless her. I love the documentary. I don't know quite if... Oh. Apocalypse Cow. Meat, a threat to our planet. You know, this is BBC. I actually watched this. So again, deforestation, climate change, looking at the waste from dairy cows, from the waste of humans. This is all good. One thing I would say is when you look at one hamburger is 660 gallons of water. I think where we've got to look at these figures is they're probably taken more from the American models, where a lot of the animals will be housed all year round, and their crops to feed those animals are more than likely to have been irrigated, probably from the Colorado River. Whereas in this country, obviously, we don't irrigate grass. So it's all naturally fallen from the sky. So in a roundabout way, yes, there still would be that water, but it would be natural. It's fallen on that ground. It's not been pumped on. It's not been drained from rivers. So again, it's a good topic. there's lots and lots of press out there. I mean, I saw yesterday a little snippet on a coal fire saying that, you know, let's get rid of this. Great. So again, the vegan society, one of the most effective things an individual can do to lower the carbon footprint is to avoid all animal products. Making the switch to veganism, one of the easiest, most enjoyable and most effective ways to reduce our impact on the environment. I mean, personally, I am a meat eater, and I still think that the UK has got one of the best animal husbandries in the world. And yeah, I can't say anything other than that, really. But on the flip side, when we look at the burger, 660 gallons for a burger, a lot of almonds grown in America take 1,900 gallons to make a pound of almonds. So it's very interesting then, you know, milk, almond milk, but obviously some people could well be allergic to dairy, and it's a great substitute. So that just reiterates what I was saying there as well. Obviously, I don't know if any of you have watched the program. Coming from a farming background, I found it hilarious, especially with the sheep episode. In my mind, sheep just like to escape, and it was just amazing to see. So I'm not overly sure if this is helped UK farming, but I think it was a very good insight. Sorry, I believe there's a question just come in.
No, sorry, it's more of a statement about oat milk being a better choice for a dairy-free milk.
Okay.
And obviously, you know, in the industry, I will always back British farming, but we do need to all work together to make it a success. What is the future? Now, obviously, in the next couple of weeks, we've got COP26. We've got George Eustace heading up there. Now, he's a Cornish farmer. There'll be lots to come out of this, and you know, we've just got to see what happens. And I think that us as a country having these forums, being open and honest about facts and figures, I think, yeah, other countries really need to step up to the plate as well. I find it infuriating that we try our hardest, yet there's coal-fired power stations still being built around the world. But you know, that's not in any of our control. I think there's going to be more use of drones, satellite technology. Now, there's great things that, as long as there's no cloud cover in this country, satellites take great images of field, so it's real time, so you could actually zoom in and see problematic weed areas in field. So you might not have to treat the whole field or weed or hoe the entire field. It just you might see a small patch in a corner of a field. You know, this is great technology. This is going to save time, and the same with a drone. You can put your own drone up in the air underneath the clouds and have the same effect. I think there's going to be a great deal of more autonomous vehicles in the future as well, whether that's electric powered, whether that's weeding machines that go into row that are battery powered to save use of any herbicides. All of these things are so advanced from where we were 5 years ago, but obviously the cost of the machines are very, very high at the moment. And will anyone adopt them just yet? I don't believe so. But as soon as the technology comes down in price, it will take on, you know, like GPS has with all farming equipment to make sure that you are drilling the right square meter in a field. Great, you know, people have adopted that technology, and it's become a lot more cheaper, so more people are using it. We've got better breeding. So if there is a trait out there, and I'll come on to this in a slide or two's time, but using breeders to make sure that the crop itself, the variety, is more resistant to a disease or a pest. But this all takes time. You'll see in a future slide just what I mean. Obviously, the elms are coming, and great. It's going to be, people will have to prove more that they have actually entered their buffer strips around the field, not paid an invoice. You know, the stewardship officers are probably going to be a lot more busier going around farms doing spot checks. I think cover crops have got a huge weight in the future, and again, I've got a little slide on this shortly. There'll be more biodiversity on farms, more trees, more hedges planted. This is all great. There'll be more access to the public as well, so you won't be able to hide anything, or, you know, you'll have to be a little bit more open. You know, you won't be able to just keep old rotting things in the corner of a field. It'll have to be, you know, removed, because there's a chance that the public might see things. Sorry, another question, I believe.
Yeah, no, Kara's just qualified what elms are. I was going to ask the same question.
Sorry, yeah. Environmental land management schemes.
Thanks.
And also, I think that a lot of farms are going to have to probably diversify businesses within their business as well. I think it's good to see that some people are, you know, using their own milk, their own produce, their own farm shops. It's not being imported from Spain from a glass house. It's actually in season, it's British, there's no air miles, the carbon footprint's so much lower. This is great. So also, so like, you'll have to bear with me on this, because we get many farmers that will ring us as seed suppliers to say that I need some seed for my stewardship. So firstly, we have to distinguish what they need, because I'll zoom in on a section of this wheel of codes.
Richard, when you say for their stewardship, what do you mean by that?
So this is where elms will all come into with sort of the land management. There'll be certain schemes to, so buffer strips around fields, which are actually in sort of like the mid-tier system at the moment, where you get your payment from what was the EU and now the British government.
Mm-hmm.
So that will finally, over a course of, I believe, 5 years, the money you get will come down each year from the stewardship schemes, but elms will replace it, not fully, but obviously there'll be more work involved and more environmental measures to prove that you are giving something back to the environment.
Yep.
So currently, if we stick with the butterfly, sorry, there's a question there.
Is elms optional?
I believe it will be, yes, but that's because of the payment, and obviously a lot of farmers do rely on the payment to keep farming. So I believe that most people will sign up to this. It would be my answer. I don't believe it's has to happen, but I think the vast majority of farmers will need a subsidy to help them through farming. So if we stick to the butterfly and bumblebee mixture, you see an AB8 code there. Now, there could well be 3 or 4 options for that AB8. So you can see it there in the flower rich margin. So as long as we have a code of what the stewardship person has said to the farmer they need, we've got a very good guess. But as soon as they say, I need a stewardship mix, there are many to choose from. So we need to make sure that for them to get the tick in the box, it's the right product for them and the stewardship scheme. So as you can see, there's many there to choose from. So butterfly and bumblebee mixture. You sow it at 16 kilos a hectare. Hopefully you can see on the right hand side that is all of the seeds that are within that mixture. So the largest quantity is creeping red fescue, which is a grass, which is 15%, all the way down to 0.5% of wild carrot and 0.25% of field pansy. So all of these mixtures have various reasons as to why they've been introduced. But again, there could be 4 or 5 different options on an AB8. So as long as the farmer uses an AB8, but we need to work out what is best for their land, and only through a discussion with them, we can work out that which mix is probably best for their land, their farm, how many years they need this mixture for. So this is taken from the government website. So how this option will benefit the environment, this was taken when you search up AB8 mixture. It's on a government website. It's probably 2, 3, 4 pages of all of the criteria that you need to meet. So for this instance, it's a flower-rich grass margins or plots provide important habitat for foraging sites for invertebrates, including wild pollinators such as bumblebees, butterflies, hoverflies, and farmland birds like the yellowhammer. So there's obviously a very good story there. And without telling a lie, we've been very, very busy this year with stewardship mixes, which is great, because if this is going out and around field margins, there's another one called GS4 mixes, and we've been really, really busy with that this year. So that's all, got some legumes and herbs in there, so you can still graze it with cattle, but obviously it's got some different stories going on with the legumes about fixing nitrogen, giving that back to the grassland to obviously reduce inputs, and that GS4 mixture has to stay in situ for at least 5 years. If after 3 years some of the species have diminished, you have to top them up to make sure that you've got your 1% red campion in there. You got your 1% Phacelia. You know, somebody will come and check in the future. So just as a bit of a picture, just to finish off, this is what will be surrounding fields. So in between the hedgerows and the crop, or a whole field put down to these. So just to give you a visual of what you might start seeing a lot more in the future. So again, what is the future? Personally, I think that this is going to have to be number one is better breeding. It's not to say that the breeders are poor now, but it is actually breeding in traits, resistance, tolerance to varieties to reduce inputs. So for instance, this year is the first year second year that RAGT, it's a French breeding company, have brought out a variety called Wolverine. It's a winter. Oh, sorry, another question?
Yeah, someone's raised the issue of GM, but can we wait till the end to talk about that?
Yeah, no worries. So this isn't GM, this is conventional breeding. So Wolverine. So it's a winter wheat, and it's the first winter wheat variety that has the BYDV, so the barley yellow dwarf virus resistance. And this is definitely going to limit any, you might need to put on 1 aphicide instead of 3. So it will definitely reduce the amount of aphicides going onto a crop. And that might just be more of a stewardship thing to make sure that the genetics doesn't break down. But the advice is this year that they are doing more trials to see if they can come down to no insecticides going forward. Unfortunately, this technology doesn't come cheap, and obviously the breeders have spent millions and millions of pounds to develop this, and quite rightly need to have their investment paid back. So unfortunately, this variety isn't doing very well this year as in sales because of the price, and when you work out the price per acre over the whole acreage, again, it's great to see that they've got it, and our stance as a company is that we believe that farmers should have a percentage, or at least give this variety a go as a percentage, because we don't know next year, it could well be the worst year known to farming for BYDV. It's been okay this year, but it could well be the worst next year. And people want to drill early, and if you drill early, you've got more chance of having the BYDV virus.
Can you give us an idea of the difference in cost? So,
oh, right. So commercially, probably Wolverine, you're probably looking at around about another £60 a hectare when you work it out. But also because the way that they've done the royalties is the fact that every year you save that seed, rather than giving a £50 per tonne charge if you use your own home saved seed, you'd actually have to then pay £33 per hectare. So the cost for years 2 and 3, if you save your own seed, become a lot more. So that £60 in year 1 could well be hundreds of pounds difference in subsequent years for actually saving your own seed. So again, yeah, you reduce your insecticide use, and then, you know, the only real cultural control that you've got for BYDV is later drilling. The later you drill your winter wheat, the less chance you will have of having an issue with BYDV, because the aphids come in early. But drilling late won't suit all varieties. So some of the popular varieties might need to be drilled now rather than mid-October. So it's a very fine balancing line that you know, it's what's best for the farm. But you don't put all of your farm down to one variety either. You do have a spread. So I think that it's great that the breeders have come up with this, but it actually took 20 years to get this breeding in place. And this is what I was suggesting earlier, just reference the oilseed rape, the loss of neonicotinoids, which is the control of cabbage stem flea beetle. So the beetle will eat the cotyledons as they emerge. So you want to establish a better, faster growing, to get it through the cotyledon stage earlier. You know, this was banned across Europe in 2018, with the exception of Poland. Now, ironically, we can import oilseed rape oil from Poland, but because they have such an issue over there, they actually got a derogation from the European Union. But like I was saying before, that it's not all about a chemical approach. So because the industry have been looking long and hard, thinking, you know, this will disappear one day, that companies have introduced a biostimulant, and the one we use is called Silas, and this will give it basically the roots a better chance of a quicker emergence, which means it might help fight that migrating pollen beetle before it attacks the cotyledon stage, so it'll get up and away before there might be an issue. So I think there was another question.
Let me have a look. I think people are making it. No, I think it's a reaction to elms.
Okay.
Yeah. The chat will be saved, Richard, and then sent out.
Yep.
So.
But again, with breeders, they've actually done a lot of work. So it's called companion cropping. So in oilseed rape, there's a variety called Black Million, which is mixed with fenugreek and Bearseem clover. The best thing about this is the fenugreek gives off an odor which repels the beetles, and then the clover, which is part of the mix, helps to fix nitrogen, which is available to the growing crop. So again, it's just trying to use some form of agronomy understanding to try and reduce the risks, reduce the go straight to a can approach. Also, through the last couple of years, or certainly in 2019, a couple of people around the country were noticing when they were walking crops that if there was an issue, it was on where stubbles have been cut very, very short. So if you had a longer stubble, it would, in a way, shield the emerging crop. So lots of people start hearing about this on a forum and give it a go. And so after a disastrous 2019, this 2020 drilling, which was just been harvested, has been much, much better, to a point where farmers who didn't grow it have started to grow more oilseed rape.
using the companion crop method with longer stubble. That's
potentially, yeah. I mean, it's all learning. You know,
Yeah.
when you have to go out and actually look at a new problem, because obviously it is a new problem. It's working out how did that field, why did that field do so much better than the neighbouring farm or 3 farms away, and it's just, oh, that field also is very, very good. And it's just noticing what differences that there might be. But obviously, all of the, you know, where the companion cropping trials, that was breeders doing their own trials, seeing what we got that we might be able to mix in a mixture that might help. So again, it's great. We've done a lot more of the companion cropping this year than we did last year. It was one of the top yielders for cropping of varieties last year because of the mixture. But there are other companion croppings. You get a little bit of buckwheat mixed in with it, and the idea of that is that it's very, very fast growing. So again, it will detract the beetle, but then in winter, as soon as you get a frost, that will kill the buckwheat, so it won't compete with the oilseed rape. And then by then, the migration's been and gone, and you ought to be out of trouble. Cover crops, I really do feel that this is one of the biggest steps we've got in the future. We're doing a lot more of cover crops, and this, when I say a cover crop, it's not sort of bird cover for shooting. It really is to establish a crop post harvest to take you over the winter. If you're putting in, let's say, spring beans, you know, you won't be drilling them until February, March, so you want some greenery in that field over winter. So this is over winter cover crops. So the reason for these is probably where I first came across it was in, like I said, the catchment sensitive farming areas, but they were being reduced dramatically to reduce soil erosion and runoff, to reduce the risk of pollution. And yes, a great deal of learning. There's sediment traps out there, but if you've got a green cover with roots, that soil is less likely to be disturbed, and heavy rain events be washed, run off down a slope and into a stream, which nobody wants. So a mixture that's very, very popular with us is a 36 kilo per hectare mix. It's not cheap, but we put on, so within this mixture, there's 32 kilos a hectare of spring oats, 3 kilos a hectare of radish, and 1 kilo a hectare of phacelia. So the idea of this is the spring oats are basically a great scavenger of any leftover nitrogen, and eventually that will help build up the organic matter in the soil. The radish helps to break up the soil to give you a better soil structure, and the phacelia helps to attract pollinators, and it also is a legume, so will help fix nitrogen. So I guess in a roundabout way, I think the future will probably come, and it will be no uncropped bare soils over winter. And that is my presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard. I think there'll be questions.